Ashoka differentiator.
Where when we first dreamt of Ashoka, we had no idea that students from 40 countries would be applying to our university. Now our aspiration is, why shouldn't it be one of the best in the world?
We are the best option for anyone wanting to do high quality scholarly academic work in India.
You firmly believed in was that this must be an institute that's also inclusive.
We are perceived as being elite. I think that's largely because we do get very good students, and some of them from the very best schools. So I do think we're serving the country in one way, which is we're preventing the dollars from going outside. Individuals, R.K. Damani, Junjunwala, Rakesh Junjunwala, many others have contributed. 200 founders have contributed towards building this institution because they believe it's an important project for the country.
So we see Ashoka's mission to really be able to serve the country in solving these problems with the cadre of young people that we are feeding into the workplace.
If you want to maximize EBITDA, you'll be a teaching shop. You'll ignore, why would you run a PhD program? It's pure cost, no revenue. Right?
So how do you look at ROI then as far as Ashoka is concerned?
It's impact. We eventually will term out, and alumni, once they have matured, will take our place. We have no owner. There's no one family that backs this place.
The myth is that, if you study history or philosophy or political science or English literature, where will you get a job?
I'm a classic example of that. I studied philosophy and guess where I am. So.
We have students who've turned down Berkeley, who've turned down Duke, Urbana-Champaign, London School of Economics to come to Ashoka.
I'm surrounded currently by parents who are going through this application and essay process. My God, it's like being back in school. It's crazy. I mean, I've literally not seen them for the last few weeks. No, we're doing essays today. We're doing applications today. I'm like, good luck with that. It's absolutely, it's mind-boggling. So,
We're rolling?
Yeah.
5, 4, 3, 2.
Hello and welcome to Young Turks Reloaded. I'm Shereen Bhan. This is a platform where we bring you deep conversation on where we currently are as a country, but more importantly, on the issues that we need to focus on. Young Turks was really about what this country could achieve in terms of aspiration, how dreams could be fulfilled for first-generation entrepreneurs. Joining me on the program today are two individuals who've done exactly that. One has been on Young Turks many years ago. Ashish, it's great to have you back. And Pramath, thank you very much for joining us here today. Let me start by talking to you about the big shift and the big change that we've seen in terms of aspiration, in terms of expectations, in terms of hopes and dreams of what this country can be. And Ashish, I want to take you back to the 90s, which is when you decided to bet on India and decided to come back to India, first to start private equity with Chris Capital, and then of course 10 years ago with Ashoka University. You've always been a firm believer in the India story, contrarian somewhat as well. As you look back at the last 20 years, what would you qualify as the single biggest shift and the single biggest change?
So I think the biggest shift has been in our aspirations. When I started with a small private equity fund, we weren't even sure if we could generate returns in India.
You weren't even sure if you would get money to start with.
Raise money was hard.
Yeah.
Today, look at the capital that's available, whether it's private equity, venture capital, infrastructure, real estate, it's exploded. I think the same is true in higher education now, where when we first dreamt of Ashoka, we had no idea that students from 40 countries would be applying to our university, that out of the 3,000 students today, they come from 400 towns and cities. So our aspiration early on was to build a good university in India, the best. Now our aspiration is, why shouldn't it be one of the best in the world? So I think it's about aspirations,
Speaking of aspirations and going from being one of India's best or India's best university to competing against global universities. And Pramath, I want to talk to you about that aspiration. But before we talk about the future, let's talk about the past as well, because, you were part of that startup founding list of team members that put their heads together. And what about a dozen of you, from Chip K to Ashish to yourself, Sanjeev Bikhchandani, and many, many others. Did you think it was going to be possible? I mean, we've had philanthropy linked to education in India. We've had business families engage and interact with institutions and set up institutions as well. But did you think that it was going to be possible for you to be able to deliver on the promise of something like Ashoka in 2010?
Well, like all entrepreneurs, you have to believe passionately and be positive that it will work out. I think in our case, and mainly the reason I got involved was the success of ISB.
Yeah.
And, ISB just got ranked the other day in the LinkedIn rankings at number 6 in the world. And at that time, ISB had already made it to the FT rankings and is in the top 20. We had kind of surprised ourselves. So I think the success of that
did that kind of become the template then to start
well,
with?
So the Young India Fellowship, which is how Ashoka started 14 years ago, was the template. But a lot of the learnings from there, and also the learnings from 2 subsequent failures, I have often talked about the fact that I tried to replicate that model in another context and couldn't make it work. So the confidence, at least my confidence, came from the fact that I had seen it work. I was probably in disbelief when we started ISB. But now that it had reached where it had, and that's why Sanjeev and Ashish reached out to me, and there were other people who were reaching out to me, was really on the back of that success. And then these other 2 failures also taught me what mistakes you could make.
What not to do.
Yes. I had also, a lot of people don't know, I had also done a university in Malaysia, which was my first project. And that's the multimedia university that is there in Cyberjaya outside KL. I had seen that grow. I used to go back there to do reviews and so on. It was a McKinsey project. So I do think that I could see this. But yes, I think we underestimated the challenges, if you ask me. I think we're very positive about where we would reach.
I guess that's what entrepreneurship is about, right? You have to have that belief and optimism, and that helps you at least gloss over the challenges that and are certain you will encounter. But Ashish, coming back to that, to that starting phase of reaching out to Pramath, of putting together this group of very diverse individuals. And this takes me back to a conversation that I remember having with Mr. Murthy about starting Infosys. And I said, like 7 of you, of course, he was the first among equals, but I said, how did you get a decision made? Because, and especially we are known as argumentative Indians for a particular reason. What was that like? And he told me, he said, look, it was very simple. We had a sort of unwritten rule that in God we trust, everybody else brings data to the table. What was it like for you?
So we started with a smaller group. As Pramath was saying, Sanjeev, Pramath, myself, only a couple of others. It was a small group. And I think we spent a lot of time. So even as a precursor, we used to meet one Saturday a month at my old office, and we would have conversations. And this happened for a couple of years. So I think that helps with alignment. And then ultimately we said, we want to build a liberal arts and sciences, an interdisciplinary university. So everybody was aligned. This was going to be
and some people did get off the ship.
Yeah, because some people wanted something else. So we were very clear that Indian higher ed had become too specialized, that we needed a new institution that really provided breadth and depth, that was interdisciplinary and holistic, and that gave students choice. So we agreed on the principles. We agreed on some of the disciplines we would cover and what we wouldn't cover. And we also said that we have to hire the best in the world to come, and the pedagogy has to be exciting. We'll primarily be undergraduate to start with.
Right.
And then over time, we'll build out a very strong PhD program. We won't have a very big master's program. So I think we spent a lot of time, so we were aligned on what the broader purpose is, the vision, broadly what the strategy is. And then we were able to bring in many other people. So we also had a governance model where we said, even if you put in a lot of money, you still have one vote. and you operate through...
How did that conversation go?
Well, I think a lot of it depends on, Sanjeev and I were initially the two largest contributors. And we've said, we are going to do this. So it just became the norm. And we just went to everybody. When actually there was someone who wanted to put a lot of money in, wanted more than one vote, we turned that person down. So it's just a principle you stick to as you build it out. But we never realized when we started that we could end up becoming the largest, we think, collective philanthropy project in India.
Right.
We've raised about 3,500 crores, Shereen, in pure philanthropic money. We've had people like HDFC Group to Axis Bank to the Bajaj Group support Ashoka at scale. Individuals, R.K. Damani, Mr. Junjunwala, Rakesh Junjunwala, many others have contributed. 200 founders have contributed towards building this institution because they believe it's an important project for the country, that India needs a new institution. That's a new form of education for India.
You talked about how one of the driving ideas of Ashoka was to ensure that you bring world-class faculty to India. A lot of the people that you have at Ashoka have decided to come back, have decided to move back to India and build their careers here. How challenging was that?
That is the most challenging.
And continues to be so?
And will always be for us. Because, there's tremendous student demand on the back of the aspirations that Ashish talked about. Philanthropy has really taken off, and we've done a good job of bringing people together to fund the institution. And you can create infrastructure world-class in India. So that all of those elements are in place. But really the key is getting faculty to come and teach here. A couple of interesting things are happening. Higher education around the world is actually going through a very tumultuous time, mainly because of technology, but also because of the demographic cliff that you're seeing in the West. So the opportunities for high quality faculty academic positions are drying up. And so a lot of people, both Indian and non-Indians, are looking for opportunities.
So is it becoming easier today then?
It is easier, but it's still hard to convince them to come to Sonipat and live there.
That is true.
But the fact that we're right next to Delhi makes it
So the Delhi
makes it very attractive.
So the Delhi location really helps us. Delhi is a happening place from that perspective. But I think we always understood what our faculty really looking for. It's not just money. It's the support for their scholarship, their research, and access to high quality students. And we have put a lot of elements in place at Ashoka, both in terms of the teaching requirements, support, financial support for research, helping them work with these multidisciplinary centers, fundraising that will support research, providing them PhD students. So these are some of the nuanced benefits that you provide in the world of academia to be able to support people so that they can freely pursue free thought and research. And so that's the real attraction, that we are the best option for anyone wanting to do high quality scholarly academic work in India. And we want to be always able to say that.
And that brings me to an important point that Pramath raised, and I want to get you to build on that, Ashish. What is the Ashoka differentiator? As I said, corporate engagement with education is not new to this country. Sure. Philanthropic engagement with education is again not new to this country. What is the big differentiator for Ashoka today as you see it?
So I think it still is the fact that we are truly interdisciplinary. These disciplinary boundaries are starting to blur. So I'll give you examples. Like, for instance, a lot of people don't know this, but we're very strong in the sciences and computer science, in addition to humanities and social science, right? So we were able to attract some very good people initially, humanities, social science. If you ask me in the sciences, why do people get attracted to Ashoka? So Dr. Vijay Raghavan, who is the principal scientific advisor, he joined as the chair of our Science Council, and he's been helping us build the sciences. He feels that science now, cutting edge science, is truly interdisciplinary. Biophysics, computational biology, it's the things at the intersection that are really exciting. And having a place where you have all these disciplines under one roof is more exciting. We had Anurag Agarwal, who ran IGIB, India's top genomics institute, left. was he felt he had more freedom here. You know, in a public institution, decision-making takes long. At Ashoka, it's more entrepreneurial. For someone like Subhashish Banerjee, who is the dean of the department head of the computer science department at IIT Delhi, you know, he wanted to do things beyond just computer science. He's interested in data privacy. He's interested in the impact of computing and technology on society. And Ashoka has, you know, people who are doing philosophy, sociology. And so, you know, this plus X, you know, if you're doing computer science, these days it's no longer about computer science. Look at MIT's computer science. It's CS plus X. That plus X you don't get at other places. So I think that is the big differentiator. This interdisciplinarity, the holistic education, this energy of the bright student who is curious and doesn't want to get confined to narrow boundaries. That's the paradigm shift that Ashoka has made.
You know, and speaking of that paradigm shift, because I think that puts in place a larger question that people are grappling with today as we enter an AI-driven world, an AI-led world. You know, the question's being asked, what does the current education system provide? Is it relevant today? What will the education system of the future need to be? When you talk about this X+, what are we talking about, Pramath? And do you believe that, you know, the system that exists today is really going to be able to deliver on the needs, the skills that the future asks of us?
I think we thought very carefully about these skills when we set up Ashoka. And I think the choice of the liberal education model was really to feed into exactly the skills that will be required in the future. So AI will do what it will, but you still have to know what data to train AI on. You still have to know what questions to ask, this whole area of framing. And AI will continue to evolve, so you have to continue to be a lifelong learner to be able to keep up with the changes that are taking place. So if you play that back, we have always believed that critical thinking, the ability to logically and do evidence-based thinking and then be able to problem solve is a core skill that you will always need. That communication, being able to engage with each other. Yes, you can get ChatGPT to clean up your memo, but ultimately, you know, when we are talking right now, we don't have the
there's
AI.
No ChatGPT.
Yes. So you need to think on your feet. You need to be able to negotiate, engage, influence, have difficult conversations. So communication skills and collaboration skills, the interdisciplinarity basically means that people have to talk across disciplines. When I did my PhD 35 years ago, one of the reasons I left academia was I was very interdisciplinary, but academia was not. And so what we are trying to do here also is to build those skills that people can actually work with each other across disciplines when they come from like Mars and Earth, right? We see Ashoka's mission to really be able to serve the country in solving these problems with the cadre of young people that we are feeding into the workplace.
You know, and that gives me the perfect segue to go back to the Ashoka mission of nation building, Ashish. And one of the important aspects that I know you firmly believed in was that this must be an institute that's also inclusive. And I want to build a little bit on that and what the effort is in order for you to be able to do that. You talked about the diversity of the students coming in from different parts of the world and, of course, different parts of the country as well. But providing access of good quality education to children who cannot afford it. I know you run a pretty large scholarship program as well. Over 500 crore rupees over the last several years have been given out as scholarships to students. Build on that for me. I mean, how important is that and how do you see that shaping up in the future?
Yeah, so Shereen, we are perceived as being elite. I think that's largely because we do get very good students and some of them from the very best schools who often had the choice to go abroad. So I do think we're serving the country in one way, which is we're preventing the dollars from going outside. And we're finally showing that it's possible for students to get a great education in India. And we hope many others do the same, right? This 10 billion going abroad can be stemmed. That's one part. I think a second part with regards to inclusion is we were always committed to this idea that we are here to get the best students irregardless. And so therefore, from the get-go, We wanted diversity. We wanted to be inclusive. As you said, we've given away actually 600 plus crore in scholarships, 100 crore alone this year. If you look at the total number of students we've had so far, 59% have been on some form of financial aid. So yes, granted, there are 40+% who paid full fees, but 59% on some form of financial aid. Over 2,000 students have been on full financial aid so far. So the numbers are quite staggering. And, we have more than half our students are women. Again, people have this perception Ashoka only gets kids from Delhi and Bombay and Bangalore and Pune. Yeah. It's not true. It's from small towns all over India. From Kottayam, from Guwahati, from Dibrugarh, all over India, these students are coming.
How do you change this narrative and this perception? I mean, of course, you can't control it, but does that sometimes bother the two of you?
Certainly does. We try the usual, ways like coming to you and talking about it. But I think the biggest thing is to get the word out directly to the students and the parents and the schools that have these kids, have bright kids and who have aspirations. And we have made an effort to do that, which is how we've been able to get these numbers. But we have a very large outreach effort, which we target. Think of them as the feeder schools to these programs. So for example, the Navodaya schools in the country, as you know, there are some 600 of these schools where the government provides free education to the best students in a district. We have a tremendous outreach to them. And ultimately, what works is word of mouth. So what happens is one Navodaya student comes and then they go back and then they become alumni.
But are you consciously also changing the outreach to include more?
Of course.
Yeah?
Of course. Yes. Of course. There's a massive effort to do that.
We go to Navodayas actually to pitch the idea of Ashoka. We're now working with a few state governments to say, tell us who your top students are and let them know that there's scholarships on offer. Send us. We can't just blindly take them, but we want more of them to apply.
So specific schools, like there's one in Patna that has been catering to a particular community of the scheduled castes. There's an effort that you might know in Jharkhand where they take women from the tribal villages and get them to play football. A lot of those footballers have been coming to Ashoka, and every year their tribe has been growing at Ashoka. And these stories then inspire others to apply.
And it's a confidence also. I mean, there was a girl, Ashwita, who came from Tamil Nadu, BD worker's child, who heard about Ashoka, actually called us from a phone booth, and she ended up at Ashoka. She delivered a TED talk in California. She's now a star on YouTube, and she's gone back to her village in helping girl children, thousands of them, to apply to colleges like Ashoka.
Let's also talk about what the future looks like now in terms of expansion. And you said, you're trying to stop the dollars from flowing out of the country for kids who are basically trying to get a good quality education. But the supply-demand mismatch is enormous, and it continues to be so. And you can only solve for a very small portion of that problem. You're, 3,000 students today? What could that number look like in the next decade?
So our plan is to get to about 8,000, possibly 10,000 students. It may take us 12 to 15 years to get there. So we ourselves will not be able to solve India's problem. India has already got 40 plus million higher ed students. And then all the students who go abroad as well. I think we're that spark to show that a new form of education is possible, that you can have a private university that's truly top class. Historically, it's only our public institutions that have been top class. And that now is leading to many other, 1,000 flowers will bloom. Right? And hopefully we lift the bar for higher ed in India. And as more universities adopt this, we've had many universities reach out to us, come. We've even engaged with Haryana government's universities. They come actually for session on campus. The idea is to spread the word, to build capacity so that we can help do it, because ourselves will be a place with, as we said, 3,000 going to 8,000, 10,000 students. creating future leaders for India. They in turn will create jobs, create businesses, make a difference.
So for many more Ashokas to blossom, let's address the issue that you brought up, the challenges. One, of course, is the people constraint that you spoke of as well. Money, I would imagine, less so today. But what would you put down as some of the key challenges to ensure that we see the Ashoka experiment take off?
I think the biggest challenge for Ashoka to more Ashoka-like institutions to come up is obviously to make the regulatory environment more welcoming. I think there has been a large opening up. Now foreign universities are also allowed to come into the country. So I think encouraging these initiatives, encouraging the implementation of NEP, which the government is doing, are all efforts in the right direction. I think the bigger challenge also is, we haven't talked about it, is research. We claim to do research, but our research is truly not of the quality that is required globally for...
Why is that the case? Because of the lack of support? I mean, and I'll just bring it down to one issue that really bothers me every time around the budget time. This is the big refrain from corporate India, there should be more tax incentives for R&D and so on and so forth. And that's the only conversation I've ever seen happen, around the need for more research and development in this country. And, what do you believe are the triggers that will change the way that we look at that?
Well, I'm no expert on this, but my view on this, and Ashish has also been working on this, is that whatever dollars we have, we tend to spread across multiple institutions and multiple projects. And the way around the world this has taken off is that you direct the funds, the meager funds that you have, to the best places and help them achieve excellence rather than trying to get everybody to be at a common minimum level. And I think that's the mindset shift that needs to happen. Unless there are large funds from the corporate and the government sector directed towards research, and those funds are allocated in this prioritized manner, you will always end up getting an average level, a mean level, which is less than the best. If you look at China and Russia and how they pushed it, they created a C9 program in China, which I think has now become a C40 program. So they took 9 universities and they said, we'll plow in whatever is required into these 9 universities to get them into the top 100 ranks in the world. And the ranking gap that we have with the world universities and getting into the top is really around research. It's not around some of the other outcomes. You can check the data. And I think, so they saw that gap and said, let's put disproportionate focus on making that happen. Russia did the same thing.
Yeah, so I think with research, Pramath's right, obviously a fewer set of institutions, also getting more talent back proactively. IITs have been doing it. I think more institutions getting the best Indian PhDs back. Ashoka has been doing exactly that. We've actually had 65, 70 of our students go on to PhD programs. Pramath's on a WhatsApp group with all of them. He's looking to entice them all to come back to India. So I think we need this 1,000 talents program that China had to bring the best scientific minds, best faculty who are abroad back to India. So that's one. I think the second challenge is developing our own Indian ethos for education. We have some real strengths as a country, our cultural soft power, our civilization. So one of the things we've done at Ashoka is part of our foundation courses. You have to take a course. It's mandatory to do a course on Indian civilization, which is much more than a history course. It's mandatory to do a course on the great books where you read, the Mahabharata or the Upanishads or other texts like that. It is very important. We have a center for translation where we translate vernacular works into English. We have a department for Sanskrit. So I think this whole idea, when you get a broader education, you get exposed to our Indian history, our philosophy, our broader understanding of the world. I think this is very important because when we attract foreign students, the Chinese do too, they should go into the world with the ideas from India as well. I'll give you a small example. I was just in Addis Ababa 4 months ago, and I had dinner with 8 of our alums who are in Addis. Someone from Kenya, someone from Senegal, the rest were Ethiopians. and they wanted to go out for Indian food. They took me out to dinner, Indian food. They were talking about India and what was going on in India. You were talking about Mr. Jaishankar and how fantastic he is. And, they follow India every day now because they're in love with the place. So I think India has that soft power, but our institutions haven't capitalized on it. We need to build it into our education. So we're trying to do it in some small way.
Want to understand from you, Ashish. I mean, you studied in the US and then decided to come back to India in the 90s because you believed that India was going to change or was on the cusp of changing. Would you like to go back to school today and do it in India? And, especially also the interdisciplinary aspect, the intersectionality aspect that you spoke of. I mean, would it be more exciting today to do over?
Yeah, I would have told a younger me that if you want to live in India long term, which I did, that you may be better off going to an institution in India now. Because the quality differential has gone away. I'll give you an example. My oldest daughter went to college in America, transferred to Ashoka a year later, and she said her Ashoka education, she's graduated now, she works in Delhi, was far better than her education in America. My second one went to the US. Now maybe regrets it because she was too embarrassed to go to Ashoka.
So you haven't stopped the dollar outflow?
No, I'm sorry, but she's back working in India now. So I'm there. But I do believe today, I mean, I'll tell you, this year itself, in our batch, we have students who've turned down Berkeley, who've turned down Duke, Urbana-Champaign, London School of Economics, to come to Ashoka. This is truly incredible. This didn't happen in the beginning. But it started to happen now. So it's not just someone who's getting into a tier 2 institution. People are getting to tier 1 institutions and they're saying, maybe I'm better off doing my undergraduate education in India. I'll get a more sort of Indian ethos. If I want to work in India long term, live in India long term, it's better for me to have a network in India. So I do think that a lot of parents are thinking that way now, which wasn't the case 10 years ago.
Let's talk about jobs and what's happening as far as the placements are concerned, because it's a fairly diverse. I think a majority, about 80+% move to the corporate sector, some to the social sector, and so on and so forth. And even within the corporate sector, from consulting to just about everybody else. What are you seeing as trends that emerge from what the placement data is telling you? But more importantly, when we talk about the jobs of the future, and even though we're an economy that's growing at 7.5%, we're not being able to generate the kind of good quality jobs that this economy needs and our demographics especially need. Do you believe that that's going to get even more challenging as we move forward?
I think the ability to straddle across different sectors, industries, problems is really what is going to be valued in the future.
So versatility, you think, will be one of the key attributes?
Alongside the ability to go deep into a problem when you need to, right? So it's not like expertise is not valued any longer.
Yeah.
But you need to quickly go in and out of getting one kind of expertise, and then suddenly things change and you have to go and do something else. The myth is that, if you study history or philosophy or political science or English literature, where will you get a job?
I'm a classic example of that. I studied philosophy and guess where I am. So
People go to McKinsey even after studying history or political science. It's really amazing.
So McKinsey will look at the resumes of people doing economics and finance, but they equally want to know if there's some bright sparks doing political science and history, and they have hired from disciplines other. And by the way, that's what they do around the world.
Yeah.
So it's not like they're doing anything different.
Unique in India,
Yes, you are hiring the best people.
I saw a video pop up this morning on my feed where Steve Jobs was basically arguing for why they decided to set up manufacturing in China. And he said it's not because of labor arbitrage, and that story is over and done with. He said, because if I were to walk into a room in the US and ask for tooling engineers, we probably won't be able to fill up this room, and we can fill up 2 football fields of tooling engineers in China, and that's the kind of precision tooling that we require for what we do. So again, linking this to jobs, skills of the future, in the Indian context, Ashish, what do you believe the priorities need to be?
So I think from our job growth standpoint, we need to prioritize labor-intensive growth. I think China did that beautifully. They realized that certain sectors really employ lots of people. And the world market is much larger than your home market. So do it to serve the world market And in the process, you'll become so productive that it'll benefit your home market as well. So what did China do? It garnered leadership in garments and accessories, footwear. It garnered leadership in electronics. It garnered leadership in toys, in furniture, in kitchenware, in home appliances, across the board. All of these are super labor intensive. If you're going to build the next petrochemical plant or the next fab, which India needs, by the way, it's not going to create that many jobs. So I think for the future, what we need is policies that will help stimulate these labor-intensive sectors. We're doing it now with electronics. Thanks to mobile manufacturing happening in India, we've seen now the policy, the PLI has worked. We've now got a PLI for components coming. I think it's going to happen. We need to do the same in other labor-intensive sectors.
Well, that certainly is the hope, and that will be the big challenge as well as we look at it. But, the lessons from the private equity world, where you really began your India foray, and where you stand today with education and trying to build an institution of excellence, beyond patience and patient capital, what have you been able to take from the private equity world to education?
I think a lot. I mean, at the end of the day, building any enterprise, whether it's an academic institution or a corporate enterprise, similar. The differences are as follows. I think one is you need to be much more long-term oriented. Universities, to build an excellent institution is a 25, 30-year journey. I think a second is universities are noisy places. We are committed to India, but
are you committed to them being noisy?
Of course we are.
Because that's another criticism as well.
No, of course we are. And there have been small blips along the way. But I think staying the course, because we know in our heart of hearts, what we're doing is we are focused on good teaching and good research, which is the crux of a good institution. And the third thing I would say is quality, quality, quality at all costs. We never prioritize numbers. We don't optimize for revenue. We are a non-profit. We have huge demand for students. We take only the best. Faculty, we had 100 faculty members apply for one position in physics. We only want to take that one person. We want the very best. And the reason is because higher ed institutions, your brand gets etched in the minds of students, parents, counselors, principals. And once it gets etched that it's the best, then the best students want to come, the best faculty want to come, join, the best donors want to come. The flywheel starts to turn. It's the reason why St. Stephen's exists 135 years later and is still a top place. It's why Harvard exists 400 years later and is still the top university in America. Oxford and Cambridge, 7, 8. Yeah. These institutions live much longer, but you have to be more patient and you can't come up with quality 10 years later. It has to be, Pramath always says it, the highest quality from day one. And don't prioritize revenue maximization. Do it slowly.
I often say quality does not scale. You can scale numbers, but you cannot scale quality. And particularly in education institutions, because that mark gets set as to where you are, right? Are you A level or B level or C level? Nothing wrong with being C level. You're still catering to a certain demand, but it's going to be extremely difficult, not in your lifetime. To get to the upper level. So I do think that it's important to have that very clear, and the non-profitness allows us to make those trade-offs. And the support of the philanthropy, of course, is key in that, because as Ashish said, then it becomes a much longer gestation period. The pressure is not there to meet the numbers, but to meet maintain the quality bar, and in fact try to not allow it to go down, but keep improving on it. That has a cost to it, which is then supported by philanthropy. So in our case, the flywheel moves almost opposite to what it does in a revenue generating model.
For corporate people, they always think, there's a market, why can't for-profit institutions be the best? But if you look globally at the top 200 universities in the world, all of them are non-profit. All of them. It's precisely this. It's the patient. You won't focus on research. If you want to maximize EBITDA, you'll be a teaching shop. You'll ignore, why would you run a PhD program? It's pure cost, no revenue. Right?
So how do you look at ROI then as far as Ashoka is concerned?
It's impact. Totally. And one shouldn't be focused on these near-term metrics alone. Obviously, we look at metrics internally, but I think those are very myopic. one has to have a longer term perspective and be very focused on governance. You know, one of the things we came up with, which I think ISB pioneered in India, was this governance model where donors become board members, trustees, governing body members, etc., early on, but nobody has an infinite term. Nobody's kith or kin, children get involved, spouses get involved. We eventually will term out, and alumni, once they have matured, will take up place as trustees and as governing body members. So this idea of a collective, you know, we have no owner. There's no one family that backs this place. It's really, if you look at Harvard, who's the owner of Harvard? It's named after John Harvard. Who's the owner of Oxford? Universities are creatures that are almost public-private. You know, you need this sort of thing where the academics play a very important role. They're the superstars. And then this governance model, which is not controlled by one person.
You know, I grew up in Bihar, and you always heard of Nalanda. And people still talk about Takshila and Nalanda as if they were our best. And I think the real itch is, can we make Ashoka have the same iconic impact as those universities have? Of course, they died over time for various reasons. This can live on forever. But I do think that it's about time that we as a country got known for our education system again, globally.
My final question, Ashish, and this is more philosophical, you know, to be deeply passionate about something, to take it forward, to take it through, you know, like Ashoka, which in itself is a startup, but also have the ability to let go. You know, and that's not easy to do. It's a challenge that many people have failed at achieving. You know, how do you deal with that? What's been the lesson there?
Yeah, for me, I always believed in this sort of nishkam karma, which is you just work without the expectation of reward, and this attached detachment. You know, you when you're passionate, you're close, but ultimately the strength of something, your true test is when you can let go. Because that means you build something that can outlive you, right? So to be attached, but yet at the same time to be a little bit aloof, to be able to look at it from a distance. It allows you to be critical, to help the place improve, also allows you to let go at some point. I mean, I did that in private equity and moved on. And I think the same is here. Ultimately, we could get hit by a bus tomorrow, you know? So, and the institution. So none of us are so great. So I think first is recognition is that there are many other people who can do what we do. But more importantly, it's healthy when you're building an institution to be able to slowly fade away and ultimately not exist.
Well, that's the perfect note to end this conversation on. But of course, the journey continues for the two of you and for Ashoka and all your other donors and founders. We wish you the very best of luck as you take forward the next decade. And we hope that we see you in all of those rankings and lists that you just spoke of. And really, we hope that this does trigger that movement of creating more institutes, more colleges and universities that deliver on the quality of education that this country requires and needs. Ashish, Pramath, many, many thanks for joining us. Well, that's it then on this edition of Young Turks Reloaded. From all of us here on the team, for now, goodbye. Thanks for watching. Do stay tuned to CNBC-TV18. We're back in a moment with more.
Thank you for watching us on CNBC-TV18. For all news and updates, subscribe to our YouTube channel and watch us on all social media platforms.